Hey, this is Professor Game, where we interview successful practitioners of games, gamification, and game thinking to help us multiply engagement and loyalty. I'm Rob Alvarez, a consultant and the founder of Professor Game and a professor of gamification and games-based solutions at IE Business School, EFMD, EBS University, and other places around the world. And before we dive into the interview, if you're struggling with engagement in your business and are looking to find out how to make sure your users stay with you, perhaps you will find our free gamification course useful. Find it for free in the links in the description. Hey Engagers, and welcome to another episode of the Professor Game podcast. And we have Mark with us today. So Mark, we need to know, are you prepared to engage?
I'm ready to engage. I'm lock and loaded. Ready to go. Let's do it.
Let's do this. We have Mark Sample today. He is a highly accomplished game development executive with over 30 years of experience in the gaming industry, and throughout his career, he has launched multiple award-winning AAA and casual games. He's established himself as a leader in the creative industry, production, and studio management. And he has expertise that spans across console, mobile platforms, and he has been instrumental in delivering over 30 credited titles, guiding teams to push the boundaries of what's possible in gaming. As a visionary, he has cultivated high-performing teams by fostering positive, innovative studio culture. With communication skills, strategic leadership, he has enabled to build lasting relationships with stakeholders and strategic partners. And his passion is for developing great games and mentoring future leaders that makes him a driving force in the evolving gaming landscape. So Mark, many awesome things going on in your life. Is there anything we need to know before we dive into the questions?
Wow, I've got to live up to all of that. That sounds pretty cool. I'm just really happy to be here and just to chat about games and be on the podcast. And I'm sure we'll have a good chat and learn a lot.
Brilliant. So when, if we were to be on your shoes, so to speak, we were to hang out with you for a day or for a week, whatever you want to go for. What would that look like? What would that feel like, being a day or a week or whatever you want to go for with you? How would we feel? What would we be doing?
Well, feeling very happy and privileged and so thankful to still be in the games industry and still making a difference. And it's so varied. What I do every day, what I do in a week and a month, it's always changing, challenging, but always fun. And I would say, some of the things that I get up to, I'm working with other discipline directors. So at Sumo Sheffield, we have the art director and we have tech directors and audio directors, all of these disciplines, and we're collaborating and communicating to make sure that we work as a unit and share our experiences and make sure the teams function well and have everything that they need. So a lot of what we do is making sure that we're informed and making sure that everybody's got what they need to make great games. Then moving on, it's reading pitches, external, internal pitches of game ideas that are coming up. Where's the next hit? How are we going to make that happen? It could be working with prototype teams, looking at prototypes, playing little builds, giving feedback, reviewing. It's then working with the studio creative directors to mentor and coach, listen to some of their challenges, maybe giving some insights on where they could improve, and just generally working with all of the characters that we meet with in the studio to try and make the best games possible. But honestly, it's forever changing. And sometimes it's cruise through the weeks and it's all plain sailing. And sometimes it's like things are on fire, things need fixing. So, it's all good and it's a challenge.
That sounds brilliant. Thank you very much for sharing that. And it sounds like a very exciting, moment and life to be leading at this point. So let's actually bring it down, let's sort of bring it down to earth in that sense. As I'm sure you know better than most other people, especially in the games industry, it's not about, you take a shot and every time you hit exactly in the target that you're looking for, right? There's hit and miss, there's failure. So we want to dive into one of those failures when you've been working in a game, or a first attempt at learning, as we like to call them as well. We want to be there in that story with you. We want to live it and maybe take a few of the lessons that you learned through that experience.
Wow, failures. I actually really like talking about failures. A lot of times we're taught, like failure's bad, but failure is an opportunity to learn. And yes, it might sound corny, but as you get older and more experienced, you realize you've got to take shots, you've got to take failures, and that's how you get better. I mean, one that comes to mind, I'll give a couple of quick fire ones. So I always wanted to make a boxing game, being a huge boxing game fan. And this was 20 years ago plus. I had a pitch document. I had everything lined up. I would go around and speak to all of the companies everywhere I went. I'd say, I've got this boxing game. Do you want to make it? And they would be like, yeah, boxing's boring, isn't it? Boring game. And I'd be like, no, we can do this. We can do this. I know how to make it fun. And, anyway, I did this for 3 or 4 years, various companies, various publishers, always the same. And I joined Rage Games and I did the presentation to them and they were like, yeah, they were nice, but maybe not. A few months later, they came back and said, hey, you still got that boxing idea? Yeah. And would you like to make a boxing game? Yeah. And would you like to do it with the Rocky license? And I'm like the Vince McMahon meme. I'm just getting more and more hyper excited. Like, wow. So, the point I'm trying to make there is with a failure, which was, trying to convince people to make a game, the persistence and belief of getting through, eventually I got a shot. So, it just goes to show, I want to let people know that, failure, sometimes you have to fail many times. You don't always win through convincing or having a great pitch or a great idea. You've got to have the right time and the right moment, but that paid off. But there's been so many times. So, I've made games where game modes just didn't work. I've made mechanics where you push and push and push to try and make this is going to be the coolest mechanic ever. It just doesn't work. And I think the biggest thing that I can talk about failure is don't get too upset with it. And also know when you're beat. I've worked on many projects where you keep pushing and pushing and pushing to improve the mechanic, look for that essence that's going to give it this great surefire hit. Sometimes it's just never going to happen, and being able to move on is just the key part of learning and finding the next best thing. So it's not always a win, unfortunately, but that's okay.
That's okay. Part of the pivot sometimes is dropping some things, and it could be a mechanic, it could be a full idea, or driving that idea entirely different. Talk about the people in Slack, right? They were game developers. They had this game thing, and they used Slack to communicate. And now a huge company called Slack came out, exactly of that, right?
And just as we spoke there, I'm coming back to the King days. I was working on a Pet Rescue Saga, and we were making this wonderful little game based on the Pet Rescue IP, a different type of game. Small team, 13 people on fire. Great vision. We all knew what we needed to do. We couldn't wait to finish stand-ups and meetings because we just wanted to go and make this game, and that's a good sign. Everybody knew we were locked, loaded, and ready. But for whatever reason, higher up above, chose that we had to kill the project. And maybe it was a failure. We were on fire, but for whatever reason, it wasn't going to work. And then, letting the team know that we're not going any further and licking our wounds and sort of still keeping together and not taking it out on each other and looking after each other. So you could say that was a failure, not because of our doing, but we just didn't quite make it. And the good thing coming out of that is I still stay in touch with most of the people that worked on that team. So even though it was a failure, even though the game didn't make it, the bonds that we made whilst making that game, because we worked well and enjoyed it. So, years later, this is maybe 6 years later, I'm still in touch with the guys, even though we're in different companies and different countries.
So, as we've said before, failure usually is not final, it's not fatal, right? So there's things to take out of these fail experiences and to use them to move forward in the same direction, in a slightly different direction, or in a completely different direction. And that's all definitely good. And it's experience, it's stuff that you learn so that you can get to that next big thing.
Nearly every single time as well is that things that fail often, not always, but often, it's because they're too complicated. You add more and more. It's got to have more depth, more mechanics, more fun, more, monetization, more. And before you know it, you had this really simple idea that was on fire. And then this becomes this Frankenstein monster. So, failure can often happen because you're trying too hard to make it great and you've got too much stuff in, and that simplicity is a good way to overcome the failures or steer away from it.
Amazing. And Mark, we talked about failure. How about we take a spin, right, and go in the opposite direction? How about a time where things actually did work out? Maybe, the boxing game that you mentioned or something.
Yeah.
You've got plenty of years in this industry, lots of stuff to talk about. One of those times where, things went well, the first or the nth time, it doesn't matter. And again, with some of the success factors, we want to, again, be there with you in that story.
Sure. I mean, the Rocky game, that is I'll not spend too long on that, but that idea, there was so much passion in there. The game turned out great. It proved that boxing games didn't have to be boring. It had that tug of war feel that Rocky had in the movies. We got that into the game. And that was just to be able to have the idea, execute with a great team, deliver the game. It did well, and it turned out how we'd hoped. That's what most game devs are looking for, that opportunity to do that. So I'm so happy that happened. But coming more recently, introducing live ops, one of the first live ops into Pet Rescue was absolutely fantastic. A little bit of a challenge there to put this new feature into the game. And
for the people in the audience who don't know what live ops, could you give us a gist of what do you mean by that?
Yeah. So with this, it was essentially a scheduled event that we could control. So we could say over the weekend, there is going to be an event where you can play this small mini section of the game and we'll get bonuses and that. So the live op is controlled events. You'll see it in Fortnite and various other games use this, where it's time-based events where you can turn events on and off and you can have fun with that time. So quite complicated back then because it was one of the first. Small experience, kept it small. The thing that made it a success, I would say, isn't just the actual idea or innovation. It was the psychology behind it. So with this, I was working with the team and I wanted to make sure that when they went to this live ops, instead of it being challenging levels, all the levels in this event would be easy. So it was easy to clear. There was just 10 levels and you get some boosters, which you could use to overcome levels. I wanted it so that when you went into the event and finished it, you didn't feel exhausted. You felt invigorated. So when you went back into the game, you wanted to play more. And sure enough, that's exactly what happened. And people enjoyed that because, with games, if the intensity, like anything, games, movies, music, if the intensity is too high for too long, the brain just gets used to it and either exhausts or turns off. So you've got to kind of play with the sine wave of intensity and emotion as well. And I think that did it well. So I could talk all day about successes, but there's been a few, but that's a great one. And just actually rolling all the way back, getting into the games industry, just actually being able to get into the games industry all that time, that's a success. I mean, so, there you go.
To either of the two, is there anything you were talking about the ups and downs of excitement and of most things? Maybe it's that or something else, but is there something that you would say, well, I think part of our success is due to this thing that we did and it actually really, really worked out? Again, it doesn't have to be a mechanic or anything specific. Like, what comes to your mind when I ask this?
Are you talking about the Rocky or Pet Rescue or something else?
Whichever you want to go for.
I mean,
I would say maybe the last one, the Pet Rescue one that you were talking about, the live ops.
Having a vision, being able to work with the team and seeing it come alive and overcome the challenges together and then getting that outcome, that's a great success. And that's one of the best feelings that we've had, or I've had. And I think the challenge there, what made it sweeter with it doing well is that there was quite a challenge from up above to release it more quickly. With mobile games, it's a lot about get it out there, make sure it's just get the roughest version, the MVP and gun. But we took the time to do the back end, to make sure the graphics was nice, to make sure that it was all done to a quality level. So when it hit, it was good. There was a lot of challenge and pushback, like, don't do this, but we did it. And, it turned out really, really well. So, that's, what was a sweet part of the success, I suppose.
Awesome. And I'm guessing a lot of that, a lot of that time as well was involved in doing some playtesting, making sure you were building the right thing for the people that you had.
All the time. So playtesting was really important. It's something that I push all the time. So we would play as a team. We would play the game and have a look, but then we'd get fresh eyes and we'd get external testing and we'd get various companies so we could see where people were touching on the screen. We'd be able to listen to their commentary and we'd be able to dissect that and see where there might be some blocks. So ultimately, it's to just make that experience as smooth as possible from the feedback. But here's the thing with playtesting, which maybe not everybody talks about, is it's an art and a skill to choose to listen to the right feedback, because if you listen to all the feedback, you're going to end up with something quite grey and flat and probably boring or worse. You've got to listen to your gut, listen to the data and find what are we going to, from this feedback we get from our players, what are we going to choose to act on and what are we going to choose not to? Because if you choose to act on everything, it just erodes the essence of what you've got.
Totally. I brought this up because sometimes people hear what you said initially and they say, oh, what I have to do is go down to the basement, right? And stick there and spend 6 months or a year all by myself, make sure everything is perfect. And only then I'll show it my product now that it's perfect. And then you have crickets, right? That's part of the issue.
And when I say, holding on, we're talking like weeks. So not even months or years. We're just holding on just that little bit more. But you're so right, and that's a great point that you made, Rob, is that, working with the teams as well to get comfortable with showing progress as it is. Because creatives, we're proud. We have a lot of pride, and it's like, it's not ready yet, so we don't show it. It really breaks down the boundaries of people feeling precious. And once you're psychologically safe with your team, that everybody just wants to make things better, then you just, I've got this idea, try this, try that. And people riff and build on it, and that's a great place to be. But you have to work at that. It doesn't come easy.
Yeah. And work is one of the core principles always in this industry, and I would guess that almost in any other. So, Mark, when you're developing one of your games, of course, it's always going to depend, on the size of the game, AAA or more, sort of casual games or whatnot. But is there maybe a sort of process? What are the things? How do you go about it? Somebody comes in with an idea for the first time, and you're going to start working on that. How does that go? Like, I don't know, give us some insights into what that looks like in your case.
Sure. Well, I do this a lot, as I was saying, with my role. So say we often it turns up with a pitch. Somebody's got a pitch or an idea, maybe 6 to 10 pages of what they'd like to do. So imagine we've seen the pitch, we've refined it. Everybody's sort of like, yeah, this is worth a go. Then get a really small prototype team. So even if it's AAA or whatever, I'm a huge fan of how far can we go with taking something from paper and get something on screen quickly with the least amount of resources, not to make it difficult, but what I've found is when you're prototyping or working ideas, there's a tendency for let's throw 20 or 30 people on and we can really make something fantastic. But you really got to build slowly with the right team and the right people and grow it naturally, but not too quickly. So the process there would be from pitch. Is the pitch good? We're all aligned? Yes. Now let's get a little prototype team there. Small team, could be like 8 people, 10 or whatever, but small. And what is the essence? Also be focused. Don't just prototype everything. Are we going to focus on the mechanic? Are we going to focus on how the camera or the feel or the experience? Drill down on what is the essence of the game and only move forward once you've proven it out. So it's a real battle between refining till it's good, but also moving on so you don't get stuck with a prototype that's been worked on for 12 months and hasn't really moved forward. So do you see what I mean? So we're always checking in with each other. What are we doing next? What's it going to give to the player? Is it going to be fun? How are we going to move this forward? So there's a lot of collaboration. And I also think when I'm working with prototype teams, I always say that the prototype is the boss. So if you want to know the answers, go ask your prototype, as in the screen, the frame rate. Is the frame rate good? Is it crashing? Does it load quickly? Can you make the jump? Is the level design good? All of your answers. Does it sound good? Go play your game. Go have a look at it. It'll tell you everything you need to do next. And when I say this to people go like, is this kind of hippie voodoo magic? It's not. It's just the essence of play a game, play it with your team, choose where you want to go, choose what you want to fix, and let's get it made. But also, the last thing I'd say as well is put time boxes on things. it's very easy. I'm sure you've heard people on podcasts talk, but it's very easy to spend a lot of time and resources if you don't time box how long you're going to spend on things, and just time gets away. So yeah.
Time boxing. Very, very good recommendation. So keeping up with that kind of recommendation, Mark, is there, again, not a silver bullet or anything of the kind, but maybe a best practice like time boxing? Maybe that's the one that you would say, well, do this and your projects are going to benefit from doing that thing.
Have a really crystal clear pitch and experience of what you want to achieve from your game. If you are going to go to prototyping, make sure you've got the smallest team with a clear vision before you start. Make sure you know what you want to achieve. You can find the fun along the way, but if you just, if you have no constraints, constraints are wonderful. They're the best thing in the world. Most artistic and creative people hate the idea of constraints, but I promise you it will save you. If you're making a car game and you say, we're going to make a car game, but we're not going to get out the car, calling out what you're not going to do is as important as what you are going to do. In fact, probably more important. So I would say being comfortable with, we're not going to do this, and we're not going to do that, but we are going to do this. That's great. And time boxing, how long are we going to spend on this before, and what is the vision of success when we get there? And the last thing I would say is get comfortable with killing your ideas. If it's no good, if it's not going to work, that's okay. Doesn't mean you're bad. Doesn't mean you're a poor designer, developer, programmer. Some things work and some things don't, or person or whatever. That's okay. Get used to killing things quickly when you know it's time. There's a few things.
Quite a few great recommendations, Mark. And keeping up with that, after seeing a little bit of the vibe of the podcast, what are the questions that we make? Did somebody come to your mind to say, oh, I'd like to listen to this other person as well answering these questions, a future guest for the podcast?
Wow, there's so many. There's so many that come to mind. I don't even know if he's still working right now, but I watched a masterclass with Will Wright of SimCity. Now, if you could get this guy on, he's one of the godfathers of games development. So Will Wright, SimCity and Spore and all the rest of it. What's interesting about him as well is that he is a designer who takes a lot of his own interests and made games out of it. And I think that makes a huge difference. And he would research so much before he even started, so that he had a true understanding of whether, how cities work and how the road systems work and so on. So Will Wright comes to mind, an old school guy, but yeah, he would be fun.
Awesome. Thank you for that recommendation. And Mark, for an audience like this one, the engagers, people who are looking at, thinking of game design and thinking of games in general to get inspired and do things that are literally a game or are inspired by games to help people, create loyalty, engagement, do their stuff in class or whatever that's going to look like. Is there anything that you would recommend in the sense of a book to say, well, read this and get inspired, or these are some interesting techniques? I don't know.
Yeah. You know what? I wouldn't say one book in particular. What I would say for inspiration is, don't feel that if you want to be a games developer, don't feel that you have to read game developer books. Read all sorts of books. If you study architecture, it could be cookery books, it could be fiction, it could be, you name it. Any type of book, you'll find far more inspiration outside of what you read in games development and that's one of my takeaways. And the other thing I would say, which I posted about, if there's one book that I would say is, go buy an old role-playing book. Call of Cthulhu, Middle Earth, AD&D, Paranoia, something like that. The beauty of these books is that it's the closest you get to seeing how systems work on paper without being a programmer. It also helps you write better documents. It helps you articulate your ideas, helps quantify, helps show progression systems. So that's, I've preached this for quite a few years, but any role-playing book doesn't have to be the latest edition either. It can be a cheap one off eBay, but honestly, you'll learn so much on how to put a game together if you just take a look through that. And that's from past experience, because when I was a kid, there wasn't game design books or anything. So that was my little Bible. That's what I would look. How do you do this? How do you make a chart or a progression system or whatever? It's all in there. And I still think it's relevant to this day.
Certainly is. I would definitely say that. And in this world of game design, right? There's many people doing amazing things, but in your case, what would you say is your superpower? That thing that you do at least better than most other people?
I would say I bring great teams together. That's what I like to do.
Super important.
I wouldn't, I might be doing myself out of a job. I wouldn't say like, hey, I'm the most creative person or the blah, blah, blah. But getting great teams and helping them get to the goal of something great in a collaborative way and feeling good about it and having passion and belief. That's what I like to do. And I think, hopefully, if I've managed to last 30 years, maybe it's working. Maybe it might be working. Let's see.
Definitely is. So now we come to what some people say is the most difficult questions for the guests, right? And you've worked on many games. I'm sure you've played many other games as well. So what would you say is your favorite game? And you can say of all time, recently, of the games you've created. I don't know, wherever you want to lead that question to. That is up to you. But what would that answer be?
Wow. It sounds like the fun and most easiest question for everybody to answer, but I reckon this has got to be like the toughest one, because right now I've got a Rolodex, I've got a filing system of games, and I'm going, oh, but not this one. Oh, but that's good. And I like wow. Well, in modern games, I'm a huge Souls fan. So any of the Souls games, and maybe that's because of the role-playing books that I used to play and the inspiration of architecture. They're great games. Elden Ring, Dark Souls 3, that's a modern game that I like to play. However, if I can mention a couple, please, if I'm allowed, I play a lot of Marvel Snap. So that is just a brilliant mobile game. I love Marvel Snap. I love the depth and complexity. I love the way that you can set up your card system. You can play in a style that suits you. You can be aggressive. You can be counter. You can wait it out. You can choose when to risk or not. There's so much in there. It's very simple. It's fast to play. Great little game, and the monetization's not aggressive. You get a lot out of it. So, but I'm not endorsed by.
It's funny that has to be. I agree, right? Don't get me wrong, but it's funny that is something that we need to talk about, right? The monetization is not super aggressive, so it's a cool game, right?
It is, and that's why I think if it was. The gaming audiences are waking up. People are waking up. And if you don't look after your audience, if you don't look after your players and you don't treat them well, do not expect them to hang around, because it's just, quite frankly, it's not fair. We got to treat our gamers fairly, and they will look after us. So I'll get off my high horse there. It's a really important one to me. But yeah, but Marvel Snap, Elden Ring, and if I go way back, let's pick an old one. When I went to the arcades, I used to play Punch Out, and that was just, that's where the boxing thing started. Punch Out by Nintendo in the arcades. There you go.
Awesome. Good stuff. So Mark, it's been an absolute pleasure having you here, having all that experience, all these years, all the stuff that you've been doing, getting a little, a small itty bitty piece of all the stuff that you've been doing. It's been amazing. Is there anything else you want to, any final words, anything like that? Of course, let us know if there's anything that we can look at, the work you're doing or the work you've done, a web page, I don't know, whatever you want to lead us to before we, or where we can contact you on social media if that's something you want.
Yeah, well, I'm on LinkedIn. If you want to find me, just look for my name. I'm sure I'll pop up, and I'm on Twitter with the same thing. So I'm around there. Check out Sumo Digital to see what we're up to. You can see what the company's up to and what games we're making. It's exciting times, and I'm just super happy to be on the podcast, to be able to chat and talk to you. And hopefully, I hope that folk who listen and watch hopefully get some nuggets out of there. And also, if people want to get in touch, as long as I've got time, I'm more than happy to help folk. I think it's time to share the knowledge and share and look after each other in the games industry, because it's a difficult time. So we need to reach out and be kind to each other, because it's tough at the moment.
Always. That's always a good thing. Tough and not tough. It's always a good time to be as much as you can open and helping other people. Mark, again, absolute pleasure having you. It's been great. I'm sure the engagers will get not one, but many nuggets and things that they can apply immediately to whatever they are working on or will work on. However, Mark and engagers, as you know, at least for now and for today, it is time to say that it's game over.
Hey, engagers, and thank you for listening to the Professor Game
podcast. And since you are into gamification and game-inspired solutions, how about you go into the free gamification course that we have for you? Just go to professorgame.com/free gamification course, all one word, professorgame.com/free gamification course, and get started today for free. After that, we will also be in contact and you will be the first to know of any opportunities that Professor Game might have for you. And remember, before you go on to your next mission, before you click continue, please remember to subscribe using your favorite podcast app and listen to the next episode of Professor Game. See you there.